welcome to Monday Mug Mentions, week number 14. This is a segment where I chat about a few things in the tabletop industry that interest me over the course of a cup of coffee. Hello, Sen, Courtney, John. Hello, thank you all for being here. I really appreciate it. Good afternoon. I hope you're having a wonderful afternoon and enjoying a wonderful cup of coffee. This afternoon, I am enjoying a cup of New England Coffee's Breakfast Blend. This is one of my favorite regular cups of coffee. I really like New England Coffee's blends and their prices. They're a really good, tasty, reasonably priced bag of coffee. So, I've had this many times before. It's one of my favorites, so I figured I'd have it today. Since it's sort of a little bit of a holiday. Speaking of holiday, just going to put up in lieu of a coffee contributor this week. Let's see here. Let's talk storytelling games. I agree, Sin, and thank you for the compliment on my mug. I'll show you the other side in a moment. It's got all 4 turtles. I love this mug. This week we are remembering, and today specifically, we are remembering for Memorial Day the almost 2.9 million people who have since 1700s given their life fighting for this country for one reason or another. This includes the Civil War, where 1 million people of our own, sort of lineage were fighting each other. So it's, remember today all of those people who have given their lives to make the country what it is, for better or for worse. We have unfortunately had to have those, encounters throughout our history, and we should definitely remember those who were brave enough to go do that. I certainly am not. So, thank you guys for being here this afternoon, and I hope you're having a good holiday. I expect it'll be a light afternoon since it's a holiday, so we'll move quickly. Let's see here. Thank you again for the mug compliment. I'll show you the other side here, Sin. It's got all of the turtles' faces on it. It's one of my favorite mugs. It's great. You can find it on Amazon. I think it's not a difficult one to find. So, let's talk storytelling games. Let's get right into it. I'm really glad to see that John's here because one of the first games we're going to talk about is actually a game that he designed. So the first game I want to talk about this week is Dead of Winter from Plaid Hat Games. And then it was also developed by Jonathan Gilmour and Isaac, I believe it's Vega. Vela. It's one of I am doing this by memory. I did not look it up honestly. I just remembered that stuff and that it came out in 2014. So there are 2 games I'm going to talk about. There's the tabletop game, and then there's the video game. It was funny because John actually brought the video game up to me, and I went back and looked at why I didn't understand a comment he made about it, and we'll get to that in a second. But in Dead of Winter, Vega, thank you very much, Sin. In Dead of Winter, there's something interesting about the storytelling aspect that the first group I played with didn't do correctly or did something that's actually in the rules that specifically says do not do. And it sort of soured my experience the first time. I've since played it correctly, and I understand very much so why it was a bad decision for the people that I was playing with to not do what they did. So what that is the crossroads cards in Dead of Winter. They give you attention and a sort of moment of choice. Sometimes they don't pertain to you, however, but it's still good if you read the story, and it actually says in the rule book specifically, read them regardless of whether they pertain to the person whose turn it is or not. And the reason that's important is because every time you play Dead of Winter, you're playing a different story. Your characters are doing different things. They're having different things happen to them. They have different crossroads decisions to make. And so it creates a different story every time you play. I really, really enjoy that. Unfortunately, the first group of people I played with had played the game many times. And so what they did with crossroads cards was this. They picked the card up and went, oh, don't worry. This either way, it's not going to do anything for you, and set it down in a pile. And I went, well, that's a boring and crummy mechanic or mechanism. That doesn't, why would you even put that in? Later, at some point, you'll see that the reason those are in is that creates a decision that you don't know anything about. And the person reading it to you should read it in a way that keeps you from knowing anything about that decision. And so the Crossroads cards actually help drive the story and the narrative of Dead of Winter very well. Even if it doesn't pertain to you at the time, you should still read them every time, and that's actually in the rules. So once I actually saw it go that way and play that way, I understood a lot better the praise around Dead of Winter is that you're getting a narrative plus the game every time in a cooperative, semi-cooperative sort of game, and I really, really enjoy that. The first time I played, also, I think our trader didn't want to do anything bad against the group. So I mean, there were a few things that made my first game sort of a bad experience based on the way people were playing it. So that's a big thing especially for a storytelling game. If you're not adding one of the most important elements, like a key element like storytelling, it's going to be a problem. So hey, Brian, waiting for a session of DOW at PGG. I am trying to head down to Providence Game Guild today, maybe for like one game and then pop back up to my house. No promises, but we'll see. If I can get down there, I will come play a game today. It's since I know everyone's down there early today. So storytelling or story reading. Well, so Sin, from the design perspective, storytelling as a designer. So you're telling a story using your game. So I guess it should be story reading from the perspective of the consumer or the gamer, the one playing, the end user. But in the case of what I'm talking about telling a story through your game. And so I think Dead of Winter does something very interesting in being able to tell multiple stories and different ways each time you play. And the digital game that I've found is similar to that, just in a certain way. And it also there's a correlation because John actually brought this game up to me. There's a game called RimWorld by Ludion Studios. And John made a comment in a thread we were talking about just digital games in that we enjoyed. And I said it felt like there was a little too much in RimWorld. And he said, but I love the stories it tells. And I thought, what stories? I thought I was just trying to like build a city out and defend it from raiders and capture more people into my game. As it turns out, I was playing incorrectly, a la the people who taught me to not use the Crossroads cards in Dead of Winter. And let me explain what I mean by that. The way I generally play like a city builder game or any kind of game with a defense thing is I will set my workers to do what I'd like them to do and then hit go on the fastest possible speed. So then they build and do what they do, and then I set up my next set of things that I want them to build, and I hit go, or I want them to attack, and I hit go, generally on the fastest speed. I realized that if you slow down and sort of pay attention to every single prompt and all the things that happen in RimWorld, you become invested very quickly in each character, in what happens. Definitely narratives, absolutely, Sen. So RimWorld creates a narrative every time you play, even between two different characters or multiple different characters. The interesting thing that happened for me is that over the course of 2 days, let's just talk about these two characters who have encountered each other very early on in the game. I've only gone back to it since John's comment, which I think was a couple days ago. So essentially, these two characters at one point took a prisoner. The prisoner had tried to attack and stayed alive through the attack, but we put him into a prison cell. We kept him there, and we tried to turn him into our own sort of colony member by healing him and chatting with him and asking him to become part of our colony. His rate of possible conversion was nearly impossible, so he was not going to convert and become part of our colony. He was loyal to his previous tribe and would never do that. So after hours and hours of giving this person medicine, a group of slavers comes through, and they're from some different planet, and they land and they come through, and it's a convoy of slavers. And I have a decision. Do I want to keep giving this prisoner money, essentially by feeding him and healing him anytime he gets sick and all this stuff? Or do I want to take a massive lump sum of silver from this trader to just let them take him with them? I don't know what they're going to do. I have no idea. So I decided very, very, I guess you'd call it maniacally, to go ahead and let the slave traders take this person who was in the prison. Hello, Daniel. Thank you for joining us. So in the RimWorld game, this has consequences. I decided with one person to make that trade and send this prisoner off with a slave trader, and I got a bunch of money for it, which is great because you need money in the game. However, my characters then, later that evening or that afternoon, got into a fist fight in the kitchen while they were eating dinner. And when I looked at the reason why they were fighting, it was because one of them had sold the prisoner to a slave trader, and the other one had a huge moral and ethical issue with that, which they should. Both of them should have. I did. It was sort of a like, this is kind of cringy, but I'm going to do it because I need the silver. So it was a very interesting moment. So later in the game, as these two have developed a sort of hatred for one another and a passion for fighting and getting into altercations and causing each other issues, I decided to send one of them on a caravan away to go save another person. And it turned out that this other person enjoyed bickering with that one person, so that when I'd sent the person that they'd been fighting with away, they actually missed them over some amount of time, because that was still an interaction they were having regularly, was bickering with them over the little nitpicky things that they had. So it's an incredibly deep narrative over the course of a few hours of playing a video game based on two little digital avatars, right? And these are AI avatars. They're not some sort of, massively crafted MMO or anything like this. This is all something that runs on your machine, less than half a gig of information total. And it's created an incredible storyline for 2 of the 8 people who live in this colony. There's 8 more people, and they all have their own quirks and issues. One of them has problems with wearing clothes. They're a nudist, but they understand they have to wear clothes because it's survival. So they're just uncomfortable, and that reduces their happiness a little bit because they always have to wear clothes. Other ones, really, really prefer to play poker to horseshoes. And you see that because they're always sitting at the poker table and doing certain things to relax. But there's not a lot of time to relax, so they have to get up and go do other stuff. So yes, Sen, I'm definitely saying you should play RimWorld. It's an incredibly well-driven narrative. I had kind of missed the point the first time, and then John said that, and I said, I got to go back to it. Everything that I've heard from John usually on a game is pretty spot on. Or, he's very, very smart designer, so he definitely sees the angles from the game. And I thought that was interesting that, again, lots of different possible narratives were there when you're talking about Dead of Winter. And then RimWorld, a couple years later, a game that comes out, has this endless sort of narrative-driven gameplay that you can gloss over by just building out things as fast as you possibly want to. But if you stop and sort of smell the flowers and enjoy the story, it's incredibly satisfying. I mean, you're seeing these relationships form between these 2 small little AI characters that are just incredibly, volatile and diverse. And it's really something neat. I'm glad that he mentioned that, and I went back to it the other day. So I had a real blast with that. So now let's get on to the media that I'm interested in this week. And this is a fun one. I actually met John and this person at the same place, Unpub 8, in Baltimore, or right outside of Baltimore. And I was enjoying myself playing games, and this person was playing what we'd call the new hotness, the Duelosaur Island, 2-player Dinosaur Island game. And she was showing me how to play, and in a very short amount of time, she taught me how to play the game with just a few sentences. So I immediately became a fan of her blog, All the Meeples of the Rainbow, and there is the link there, and it's Steph Hodge. And Steph is awesome. She writes about board games, and she takes great pictures of board games and shows off a pretty incredible variety of games on a daily basis, as it seems. She was at BGG-Con this weekend, and if you go look at her Instagram feed or this BGG thread, you will see an incredible amount of content from the weekend and content from the last few months that she's been playing games, all the way back to Unpub 8, I'm sure. So one cool thing Steph does is that she posts on Instagram a ton of pictures, but if you go to this Board Game Geek blog, you'll see that she writes up about every game she played, sort of gives you an overview, an idea, if you look at the few sentences she writes, I mean, you're going to know whether or not you probably enjoy this type of experience based on each of her individual blog entries. So, for instance, her Feast for Odin entry let me know that I definitely want to finally play that game, because it keyed in on some points that are things that I enjoy in games. So, hey, John, thank you for joining us. So, you know what? Before we go full on into Steph's blog, I would love to hear about any of the storytelling games that you all enjoy. So, narrative-driven games, guess we should say. So, any of your favorite narrative-driven games that perhaps are, the kind of thing that you remember months later. That's usually what I'm looking for in a narrative game. Is not something I remember for the rest of the week, but something I remember months later. And that's I think with Dead of Winter, once we got the Crossroads cards really working, now I have a bunch of different fun experiences that happen to my character based on decisions I made, in reference to the Crossroads cards specifically, that are fun moments, and including really making the wrong decision many times. So, yeah, I would love to hear about any of your favorite narrative-driven games. Another one that I kind of enjoy, where you're reading the story and learning the narrative, is Above and Below. I haven't played Near and Far yet, but Above and Below, I enjoyed that. I did feel that the choices felt a little on the nose pretty often. But yeah, so Steph's blog has a ton of information. I don't know if any of you have ever read or checked it out, but it's also got a ton of photographs. So you're going to get a general overview of what's going on with the game. You're going to understand what people are enjoying about a game, both visually, and you're going to get a nice little write-up about what you would enjoy or wouldn't enjoy, what the major mechanisms are that are in the game, how long it takes to play, what happened in her game, and I really, really enjoy that. I think that's a fun way to share board game content. I think it's a fun way to, increase the ease of access for people to sort of go, what kind of games do I want to play? What do I want to spend my time playing? That's a big, big part of, playing board games, is knowing what you want to play and sort of not spending time wondering, what should we play? Should we do this? Should we do that? Getting right into games can be very fun. So yeah, let's move right along. Anyway, if you do not follow, I just actually recently realized this. Every week or so, or every few days, I was going and just typing, all the Meeples of the Rainbow in Google and going to her Board Game Geek blog that way. But I just hit the subscribe button over on the side where it's got like a little CSS feed thing and a subscribe. It's Board Game Geek, sometimes difficult to navigate, but yeah, you want to. Now that I'm subscribed to it, I'll just see it each time she makes an entry, which is exactly what I wanted to be able to do in the first place. I'm starting to become a dad on the internet. That's for sure. Like, I'm becoming old and not navigating it as well. Also, Board Game Geek they could make their interface a little easier. I think we all probably can agree with that. I think they're working on that right now, though, for sure. Alrighty, let's see here. Let's go in to talk about this week's marketing topic. Before we do that, if Sen is still around, I'll mention this on my way out too, but if y'all are around this Wednesday, I will be hanging out with Sen and Erica on Meeple Syrup. Meeple Syrup. Did I say that with an American enough accent for you that it's not Canadian? Meeple Syrup. At 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time with Stephanie Kwok. We'll be talking about, we're going to be doing an episode called Don't Call It a Comeback. So y'all come and check that out. This will be my first time ever doing Meeple Syrup, but I've been watching the show for a few months now, and I really, really enjoy it. Sen and Jesse and Erica are very, very, very knowledgeable. Between the three of them, they also all have a plethora of game designs. So I'm really, really looking forward to chatting about that. We'll be talking about what happens if your Kickstarter fails the first time and how you sort of pivot and come back and knock it out the second time. And Stephanie did that very well, and I actually looked at some of her tips going into our campaign to be able to do that for our campaign. So I'm very, very, very honored to be able to go and help share that knowledge, and thank you to Sen for inviting me, and Jesse and Erica for having me as well. I appreciate it. I look forward to it. So let's talk about this week's marketing initiative. Excuse me. and that is Kickstarter campaigns and when should you start pre-marketing your tabletop campaign. Excuse me. So this is a question that's been answered a couple times by a few different people in a much longer form. I'm going to try and condense what some of my favorite industry folks have said just into a few key points. So first of all, what is pre-marketing? Let's go over that real quick. Pre-marketing is not the actual portion where you're like, here's my game, check it out. You know, it's on Kickstarter right now. It's not the point where you're like, here's my game, it's coming to Kickstarter in a month. It's the point about 6 months to a year before you're going to launch. Depending on the scope and scale of your product, pre-marketing is preparing branding, logos, a website page to display where your launch is going to be, give more information about your game, go over all the different things that you might be interested in sharing with your audience. So you want to get those different points ready prior to even getting all the graphics ready to start showing the game off, because it will help you quickly define the scope and the aim of your game. If you have a market that you're trying to reach, if you start doing your pre-marketing early enough and your actual product is targeted at a different market, you're going to find that out if you've done the right kind of pre-marketing, because you're going to put together a website, logo, and branding all for your product, right? And you're going to see, wow, once you look at all this, this is definitely not for war gamers. This is much more of a Euro type thing. Or this is definitely not for family gamers, because this has a pretty, graphic motif to it. There's some things that you'll find out pretty quickly, especially if you're new. If you're more seasoned, you might be able to catch those prior to even, while you're doing the pre-marketing, be building the world that you're trying to build. But you definitely want to get your branding and your logo and your website page all sort of ready to go, and have them built out to support your product prior to even telling people what the product's going to be. So that when you say, hey, here's my product, people have a place to go look at what is this, how does it work, and it looks professional. There's been a lot of times lately where I've seen links to games that people are working on that are a prototype. If you're trying to pitch to publishers, I think that's fine. If you're trying to sell to the mass market or even to a fairly large fan base, I think there's sort of there's a certain point where you want to actually move from, privately prototyping and not sharing pictures of things for the most part, to, hey, we're preparing this game for a Kickstarter campaign. And there's definitely a point where you want to start showing things off. It's not the prototyping stage, in my personal opinion, in terms of spending money to show that off, to advertise it. I would say once you have your pre-marketing finished and completely wrapped up, that's when you can start spending more money. But the biggest part of pre-marketing, and I have this like double starred on my list here, is social engagements. It's what I'm doing right now is sitting here and talking to people and actually engaging with your fan base, engaging with people on different design forums, people who are asking questions about Kickstarter, people who are asking questions about how you do certain things. I've had this question, when should I start doing my marketing stuff? And that's why I put pre-marketing here, because I think most people are thinking, oh, well, I should just start spending money on marketing stuff out. Well, is your logo ready to go? Is your website, have a pretty good explanation of what people are getting for their money? Does it have your MSRP? Does it have a playtime? Does it have the amount of people who can play the game? Are all those things ready? And have you engaged on these different forums that you're getting ready to advertise to? That's the biggest one for me, is social engagements on the actual forums where you're, trying to advertise. If you look at any of the bigger tabletop forums recently, and you look, and let's say we're gauging by likes or by shares, the amount of popularity that I guess you would say posts with Kickstarter links in them get. So we're talking about posts that are pretty much, here's my Kickstarter, check it out. If it has the word new member at the top and shows that they're a brand new person, they've never been there, the number of likes is statistically very low. I was going through them, and I think I counted on more than 30 posts with new member on it, less than 10 likes total. So that's a bunch without any. And then I looked at the posts from people who engage the community. ones from different companies. I really don't want to name too many people because they do a great job of it, and I don't want it to seem like I'm sort of calling out what they're doing. But if you look at the ones from the people who are active in all of the different forums, and if they're active and they give good information and they actually truly engage, they'll have boatloads of likes and loves and shares on their campaigns. And that's because this is a community and you've got to treat it as such. You can't really just jump in and go, here's my board game. There's too many board games right now. There's too many board games to just act as though we could all just hop in at any point and say, I've got the best new board game, and I think I'm just going to advertise it. I've never talked to anybody. I've never met anybody in the industry before. We tried that very early on, and I can tell you through the trial and error basis that you're not going to make the best new board game without talking to all the people in the industry and learning from them and seeing what they're already doing and sort of going through those learning pains, I guess you'd call it, and finding out that you don't know as much as you think you do about board games. And I'm still finding that out on a regular basis. So Andrew and I both learn things all the time from people who are far more talented than us. We make mistakes all the time. So that's definitely something I think you should be aware of. But when you should start pre-marketing is 6 months before you plan to sell your first, do your first paid ad. That's my personal idea. And that begin pre-marketing means begin the branding, begin the logo. It doesn't have to be done 6 months before, but you've got to have those balls rolling. You've got to have a good concept of what the product is going to look like in the end. For our current projects, 3 out of 4 of them, we already have mock-up boxes. 3 out of 4 of the ones that we're actually currently pursuing as much as we can have mock-up boxes. A couple of them are waiting on artists to get things done, but every single ball is rolling. There's someone working on something for everything all the way down the line, which is always a really, really nice feeling when you know that you've got momentum and things are moving forward. So I definitely encourage everyone to start this process much earlier if you're a creator, including your social engagements, asking questions, answering questions that you do have good knowledge about. If you have marginal knowledge, maybe not answering in a way that's matter of fact, but answering. I like to say I suggest this. However, I'm relatively new in the industry compared to some of my peers. Most of my peers at this point are much more knowledgeable than I am in a lot of different avenues, so I tend to ask them questions. Some of the designers we're working with, I ask questions about manufacturing stuff because they've worked in that arena as well. So don't feel like you shouldn't be asking questions. I think that's something we talked about last week too. If you're on the design side, is ask questions to publishers, ask questions to other designers. It's a pretty open industry. Everybody's pretty forgiving if you ask even a silly question that's been answered 100 times, 100 places. But do your research as well so that you're sort of not bothering with questions like, hey, where do I print and play some cards? I mean, there's tons of resources for where you can do those sorts of things. So certainly use Google a little bit. But then if you have a question that you're really struggling with, go to those design forums. Everyone is very friendly with how to get that kind of information out. And I try my best to suggest good things and lead people in the right way as well. So I don't see the chat rolling. I also know that it's a holiday, so I think I'm going to go ahead and say thank you guys for being here. I really appreciate it. This has been a nice, relaxing Memorial Day, but I am back at work today, so I will be back at my desk. I have a meeting tomorrow that I've got to prepare for today, and I've got some other work to do. And then again, Meeple Syrup, 9 p.m. On Wednesday evening. That's 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Episode's going to be called Don't Call It a Comeback. And thank you again to Sin and Erica and Jesse for having me. I really appreciate it. Y'all have a wonderful, wonderful week. Enjoy your holiday. I hope that you're out enjoying the nice sun or out by the beach or the river doing something fun. I am going to get back to work, and I really, really appreciate everything that you guys who are in the military do, and those who have in the past been lost. I really, really, I really, really want to take the rest of this day, and everybody should, to sort of just remember what that is. I mean, that's almost 3 million people who have lost their lives. So give us what the quality of life we have now in the United States. So, for better or worse, definitely something to keep in mind and keep you humble throughout the day. Definitely keeps me humble. I'm definitely not brave enough to go do something like that. So, Daniel says, agreed on becoming a member of a community before you sell that community. Totally. You should be friends with people in the board game industry because you love board games, and that's why you make board games, not because you're looking to make a lot of money. That is both a silly goal because it's not super reasonable, and because it's, sort of, this is a creative endeavor, so you're going to love it if you're going to do it. So thank you guys again for joining me. Have a wonderful, wonderful week. Enjoy your 4-day short week, and we will see you next week, same time. Thanks again. Bye-bye.